right? This Pasha, Pasha's Vayeitseh, tells us about Yankiv leaving Eretz Yisrael and going out to Choron, and there he would be going to Choron not to visit, but actually to stay there for a goodly while. And we know that ultimately he stayed there 20 years, 22 years all told. And he worked, he labored very, very heavily, even to the extent that the Gemara says, he didn't have time to learn during these times, because he was busy tending to Lavan's sheep day and night, as he himself describes it in the Pasha. And it was a kind of a miracle that he didn't forget his learning. And we're going to see later on the similar thing repeated itself with Yosef. But Yosef was away from his home, also for 20 years. Actually from here, and he also didn't forget his learning. It's an amazing thing. And during this time, Yankiv, as I said, he tended to the sheep of Lavan, and he had to deal. It's not just tending with the sheep of Lavan. He had to deal with Lavan. He had to actually be involved with negotiating with Lavan, who was, as the Torah says, Ho'arami. His whole big title is that he was very conniving and very devious, and you had to be careful on every step of the way. You had to be what they call a Philadelphia lawyer to negotiate your contracts, and then it didn't help. And all that Yankiv had to actually live through, while at the same time he was raising a family. And he was raising a family, not just raising a family, providing for their upkeep. He was literally raising a family in the midst of this abyss, of this impurity, to ultimately become the roots of the Jewish people. And this is something which is pointed out in Chassidus in general, and Rabbi Sichas in particular. Amazing thing that Avraham and Yitzchak in particular stayed in Eretz Yisrael all his life. Avraham did not stay all his life in Eretz Yisrael, but nevertheless, from the time that Ishmael was born, he never left Eretz Yisrael. He lived in Eretz Yisrael, which means he was in his own abode, in his own melucha, in his own kingdom. He ran his own household, and yet we know that Abraham had Yishmael, and Yishmael ultimately turned off from Abraham's path. As the Torah says, that Yishmael could not mingle with Yitzchak, to the extent that Abraham had to send him out of the house, which was extremely difficult for Abraham to do. But he had no choice but to do that in order to preserve the purity of Yitzchak. Yitzchak, as we said, lived in holiness throughout his lifetime. And his wife, Rivka, was a tzidkonius in her own right. And yet, they had an Esau who did not follow through on the ways of Yitzchak. They also had a Yankiv, who was the purest of the pure, the greatest of the greats. But nevertheless, they did not have what we say a complete household. There was a breakout. Even though they lived in an environment of their choosing. No external influence per se. In other words, its only influence was only because Esau went out to look for it. But without that, there was no external influence. They were completely in their own. Yitzchak, as you learned last week, Yitzchak was extremely successful, was blessed by Hashem, a tremendous blessing of wealth and welfare and of well-being, to the extent that Abimelech, the king, came and begged him, let's make a treaty. Not that Yitzchak was going to attack him or anything, but he said, let's make a treaty. I want to make sure that you are going to be my friend. Can you imagine that? The king of the land is asking the stranger, essentially, who needed his permission to live in his land. He says, please let us be friends, let us make a treaty. That's the extent to which Yitzchak was successful in building his own home. And yet, there was this union of Esau that swerved off. It wasn't a complete home. Yaakov, on the other hand, he was working by Laban. He was not in his own abode. And he had to account to Laban, and Laban was always on top of him. And he raised a family of 12. Each one of them was a member of his family in the fullest sense of the word. You can imagine what it means. 12. You know, there was once an encounter. There was when Israel, was first formed had its own government. So the first president of Israel was Vayeitseh. And Vayeitseh came to visit the United States. And that time, the president of the United States was Truman. So Vayeitseh said to Truman, said to Vayeitseh, they were this guy, talking casual talk. He says, it's very difficult to be a president over 200 million people. So Vayeitseh answered rhetorically and says, it's more difficult to be a president over 1 million presidents. Because every Jew is not the president on his own right. Jews think for themselves. So you can imagine Yankov's sons, each one of them is a nation unto itself. As a matter of fact, this is how the Rebbe actually said they should be. Each one is a nation unto itself. There were 12 nations that comprised the Jewish nation as a whole. And each one has a different tendency, a different leaning, and different nature. 12 separate nations. Reuben was not Shimon and so forth. Each one was different. And yet, it's one nation. And as we mentioned already, we'll have a chance to talk about it in the coming weeks. Yosef HaTzadik was separated from his brothers. He was sold into slavery, as you will see, by his brothers. So you would think, okay, that's it, this is going to break this family up. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. That unit stayed a unit 100%. And eventually when they reunited what we call seamlessly. You know what seamlessly? Without any difficulty. I mean, you couldn't tell that there was some kind of a line, a distinction. And when they were enslaved, Yosef, the tribe of Yosef, were among those that were enslaved together with Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. Not Levi, Yehuda. Same thing. Yosef could have claimed and say, listen, I have nothing to do with these guys. I'm the king over here. I'm from the royal family. Didn't happen. And this was accomplished, and they said, under the circumstances that were totally not conducive to this kind of unity. So for this, it's explained in Chassidus, and the Rabbi explains it in Sichos, speaking about, particularly in this Seder, this Pasha, that the avodah of Yankiv was different than that of Avraham and Yitzchok. Avraham and Yitzchok also maintained purity. And they like we said, Yishmael was sent out on the house because we had to protect Yitzchok. They maintained purity, and they kept foreign influence out. Avraham stayed his ground, and he did not allow any kind of impurity to set into his home. And Yitzchok likewise. And this was all in Eretz Yisrael. And yet Yankiv was the only one who was, you could say, fully successful. What was Yankiv's key? What was the secret to this success? So the principle in that, what Yankiv was engaged in, Yankiv was not simply separating himself, running away from impurity. Like by Yitzchok, when Yitzchok was told to move, you learned in last week's Parsha, he went and he moved away. And then the Roye Gvul and the shepherds of Gror came and started having arguments with him, so he moved further away. I don't want anything to do with you, just leave me alone. Yankiv, on the other hand, he actually went down there and he actually dealt directly with Laban. He didn't move away. He dealt with him. It's an interesting thing. You've learned already that as soon as Yankiv came to Choron, right in the beginning of the Pasha, what was the first thing that he encountered? What was the first thing that he encountered? Anybody?
The well.
What?
The well.
The well. And?
Stone
Huh?
on it? Stone on it? Or Rachel?
You mean the shepherd?
The shepherds, right. The first thing.
I'm just wondering, it was something like Vayeitseh and his brothers. Vayeitseh dealt with the crowd and his brothers didn't. Vayeitseh had a similar thing where he dealt with the population while the others really separated themselves from and served Hashem privately, which is why they couldn't recognize him.
Yeah, but that's, okay, we'll come back to this. Okay, we'll learn in next week. But we know that they all stayed on the same path. That's the main thing. The first thing that Yankiv encountered when he came to Choron, yes, there was the well with the stone on top of it, and there were 3 shepherds with their herds sitting around it. And the Torah tells us they were waiting for others to gather together so that they can roll the stone of the well. What did Yankiv say to them? Can you imagine this? Yankiv is a stranger here. He's first coming. He has no idea what's going on. As a matter of fact, in a certain sense, he put his foot in his mouth. Right? He says to them, "What are you doing sitting around? Come on, let's get off your seats, get off your horses and feed the sheep and go on." Right? Who are you? And moreover, Rashi explains, based on the words that he said to them, and explaining the various words, he said to them two things. He says, if these sheep belong to you, so why are you wasting your time? Go and herd them. Sheep have to be in the field eating, not sitting around. You're losing precious time in raising and fattening these sheep. And if in fact these sheep are not yours, and you are hired workers, that you're herding sheep for other people, so you are shortchanging your masters. You're being dishonest. Can you imagine that? A total stranger coming in, says, "Hello, hi brothers. How come you're doing your job?" Have you anything like this? And yet that's exactly what happened. What does this tell you? Yankiv did not go to Choron to stay aloof, not to get involved. He went to Choron to make a mark, to do his thing, not to stay separate. To be Yankiv and to make his point and to announce and make his principles known, but not in a separate way. Actually, by influencing, by transforming the Choranians themselves. Working with them. That's what's Yankiv. And this is the difference between Avram and Yitzchak. They were not in that way involved, and Yankiv, this was his way. He actually stooped down and got involved with them. You can imagine that this level of involvement with the Choronians, and then after subsequently with Lovan and so forth, and this is talking about decades and decades, you can imagine that it involved, it required enormous clarity of vision, not to be mistaken, not to be swayed. Because Yankiv himself, as he describes over there, Lavan did not deal with him honestly. And you'll learn later on that Yankiv said, "I did not have a chance to grab a nap. I was constantly at work. I could not relax." So if somebody is being driven like this, dishonestly, what would be a normal reaction? Cut corners a little bit. Like he is dealing with you like this, cut corners a little bit, not Yankiv. And particularly when he is amongst people who are cutting corners all the time. They're sitting around the well and doing nothing. So he could have joined the flock, the trend of the land. And he did not. Thereby, What Yankee has accomplished over these 20 years was he proved a new path, a new reality, that serving Hashem and being, so to speak, at the awareness of godliness is possible not only if you're aloof completely of the world, but it is possible, and on the contrary, it takes root if we can work through and with the world itself. Because this is in absolute truth, God created the world, and there is nothing in the world that does not ultimately represent a godly element, and cannot ultimately be transformed and be used in a pure way, in a godly way. And this was Yankov's approach. This was his mission, to bring the godly force right into the world itself. And this is how he was ultimately successful in building and having 12 giants, 12 presidents, and yet they should be all part of one nation. As we always say, that this is essentially the Parsha, and this is the Rebbe's insight in the Parsha. But then, as I said, the important thing is to pointedly, directly find ourselves in this message. Hello? You're sitting around the well and you're doing nothing.
We had to roll the stone out.
Right. Got all these people helping you roll your stone off. You're letting him roll the stone off and you're sitting around and watching him do it. Doesn't work that way. This is exactly what we're talking about. We know very well, we all have our intellect. We all are smart. We're all able to understand. We're all able to feel and know. But that really is not the end of the story. You can understand and feel and know, and then you're in Choron. And it's a different culture, and it's a different world. And this Choron exists right within ourselves. Because in ourselves we have the Yetzer Tov, we all know, and we have the Yetzer Hara. And it's an amazing dichotomy. It's like a dual kingdom within each individual person. And Yankov Avinu went out, he undertook to prove that this dual kingdom really comes from one source. And if you confront the Choronites, if you confront them, they will come around and follow you. Because ultimately everything comes from Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe, you learn, the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that this conflict in a person, in each one of us, between the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, between Yankiv and Lavan, is in this conflict is meant to be managed in a way that is beneficial for both. Beneficial for Yankiv, beneficial for Lavan. Because as a matter of fact, as you will learn later on in this parsha, an amazing thing. Yankiv was working, and Lavan was constantly on his case. And Lavan then confessed, recognized, and says, "You know something? I have been blessed by your coming." I have been blessed by your coming. Please don't leave me. You can't leave me. In other words, this was beneficial for Yankiv and for Lavan. This was not a one-way street. This is what the Alter Rebbe explains. There's a Yetzer Tov in the person, there's the Yetzer Hara. There is the inspired, the spiritual, the intellect, and then there is the emotional, and then there's the tangible, and then there is, of course, the desires and taivas and so forth. It's an interesting thing. It'll take a little time for us to get this point, but I want to bring the point out. We mentioned many times that Shabbos, you have to have candles. Shabbos, you have to have candles on the table. One of the reasons for these candles, amongst others, that you have candles and you should have light on the table, because Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to enjoy your food. And in the dark, you can't enjoy your food. That's what it says. In the dark, you can't enjoy it. And you don't see the food that you're eating, even though the food, the taste, and the health aspect is independent of sight. But nevertheless, you can't really enjoy your food in the dark. Now, we know that dark and light, the contrast in dark and light, as the Gemara says, that in the first day, when the world was first created, it was dark. It was all dark. And then Hashem said, let there be light. And the Medrash says, I don't know if I ever told you this, the Medrash says that when Hashem said, let there be light, this was the contrast between the Maaseh Horshoim and Maaseh Tzadikim. The deed of the Rishonim, the actions and the lifestyle of the Rishonim is represented by darkness, and the actions and lifestyle of the Tzadikim is represented by light. These are two different paths in the world. The Rishonim and Tzadikim, dark and light. So dark and light is dark represents the Elam Hazeh, this world, and light represents Tzadikim, Kedusha. So you would think, when would the person, you were trying to eat and enjoy your food, right? Enjoy your food, the physical food. You would like it to be dark. Who needs light? The light would be detrimental to enjoying your food. Right? Because light represents an elevation, a purity, a tzaddikim, a ruchnius. Who wants ruchnius? I want to enjoy my food on a simple level. Take the light away. I want it to be, heavy and fatty. No. Even the Yetzer Hara says, I need a little light because if I don't see it, I don't enjoy it. If I don't have a little bit of Maaseh Tzadikim, I don't enjoy it. it's an interesting thing, you should never know of it, but in the city, when you have the fancy restaurants where people go to enjoy their food, it's always dark, semi-dark.
It's true.
Semi-dark, huh?
Supposed to be kind of intimate and romantic.
I don't know what it is, but I know that darkness does represent some kind of a special connection to Elam Hazeh, to this world. But in the very real sense, light contributes really to the enjoyment, in the real enjoyment of life. Even on the simple worldly level. So, I said this, not that I mentioned, eventually, as time goes on, we'll discuss it more and more, but that is really a reality. That for a human being who has both a Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Tov is also a participant in his life at all times. And the Yetzer Hara welcomes the inspiration and the illumination that comes from the Yetzer Tov, even for its own sake, even for its own little things, for its own tivus and to enjoy the food. Except that this comes after work, after you work with the Yetzer Hara, like Yankee works with the Bnei Chora. In other words, the path of life, this is what Chassidus explains, you've learned, that one of the important aspects of Avodas Hashem is what we call iskafia v'izhapcha. Iskafia v'izhapcha. Iskafia means that you have to subdue the instinct. Subdue. Iskafia means simply subdue the instinct, the animal instinct. And ultimately, you succeed in becoming izhapcha, where you transform the animal instinct, and then the animal itself comes and joins the human element, the human aspect. The union of iskafia, of holding oneself and subduing one's instinct, sounds like we are kind of imposing a negative element in the person, saying, "Oh, you're bad. Hold yourself back and don't." Don't allow yourself, don't indulge and so forth. It's like pointing out to the negativity of the person. The ultimate reality is, this is what Yankee Ovino started and he proved it true. The ultimate reality is that in order for a person to actually enjoy the world, to actually appreciate life in the world, it can only occur if he imposes a certain amount of self-control, a certain amount of direction, of self-discipline. Without that, he can't possibly enjoy it. You know, there's an interesting statistics. You know what statistics is? World history, world record. In the royal families in the world, I'm not talking about the royal families in the world, like England, and even in the so to speak, in the decent royal homes, in England and Scotland, Sweden, whatever it is, in the royal palace itself, there is so much unhappiness, so much intrigue. You would think that in the royal palace, you know what the British crown, so to speak, the royal palace gets from the government in order to maintain their lavish lifestyle. It's a staggering amount of money. Really, staggering amount of money. It's just this is to maintain the crown. Nothing is ever lacking there. And there is so much intrigue, and cousins and brothers and sisters. It's amazing. Because without the application of the intellect, without the application of the human element, even by going, without the application of what is this all about? What is life all about? As some significance and meaning, there's absolutely no way to enjoy even the animal. The animal soul, the animal doesn't enjoy it. The British, I don't know too much about it, but the little bit that I know is sufficient to us to kind of understand what's going on. They have a very long tradition of how they behave in their worldly activities. There is what they call 4 o'clock tea. 4 o'clock tea is chok v'lo yaveh. This is like a rule intransgressible. You cannot possibly deviate from that. It has to be 4 o'clock on the button. Boom, 4 o'clock on.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said some interesting word I never heard of.
What?
4 o'clock tea.
4 o'clock tea.
4 o'clock. I didn't realize you said 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock tea on the button. And that is a time that you have to sit down and settle down in company. And you have to wear special garments, special clothes. You have to be all ready for that. And you sit and you sip tea. Okay? And if, I'm sorry? I think so. I mean, the upper class, for sure. If you don't do it, you're not a Briton. Then you're in the lower, right. Whatever it is, they have these various classes. If you're an Oxford graduate, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're liable to lose your license. Anyways, what I want to point out is, drinking tea is drinking tea. But even to drink tea without some kind of a embellishment, some kind of a presentation and discipline, you lose interest. There has to be some kind of a. Of course, it's all folly. It's all imaginary. It's tussing. But there has to be some kind of a human element, except even though that is completely misappropriated, misguided to this kind of fanfare and all that. But what we need to understand from this, if you have a cloud, it says we can learn from the way the klippers do how this should be done in kedusha. In kedusha, for sure, as we said, in order to live a normal and a healthy and a productive worldly life, you have to have the input and the discipline and the iskafia, where you do not follow the instinct. You do not lose sight that instinct is animalistic. Human being does not act by instinct. Human being acts intently by intellect, not by instinct. Like the Gemara says that if, as Hashem, the Torah were not given, then we would be able to learn certain good qualities from the animals. We would learn tznius from the cat. We would learn gzela. We would learn honoring other people's property from the ant, because the ants have their colonies and they don't intermingle, and other kind of things. So I just want to, that we should for a moment focus in, what does this mean? The Gemara said we will learn from the ant and from the cat. Does this mean we would be imitating the cat, imitating the ant? It doesn't mean that. Because the ant is doing it instinctively. The cat is doing it instinctively. The human being cannot do it instinctively. It has to do it up into the seichel. So what it means is that when we would observe the cat, then we would recognize intellectually this is the right thing to do.
So they just do it because it's their nature?
What?
Oh, they just do it because it's their nature?
They do it because it's their nature, of course, instinctively. They know the difference. They know the difference. But we would do it because our intellect, they would just be the catalyst, pointing out, and then we would see, oh, that's a good thing, that is the right thing to do it. But we have to do it intellectually, for the right reasons. So this is, again, this is a great principle. Even though we say iskafia, you have to control yourself. You have to force yourself. You have to fight yourself. You have to force yourself to get up on time. You have to force yourself to go to sleep on time. You have to force yourself to be in discipline in time and be on time to daven, on time to learn, on time to eat, everything, and eat in the proper way. So you say, oh, I'm constantly being bombarded with forcing myself and controlling myself. That goes against my grain. Not true. Not true. This is the greatest blessing for yourself. This is the means by which you can ultimately enjoy your meal. Enjoy the things that you could to partake of the world. And if you do not have that discipline, and if you're open-ended, this brings about the greatest disappointment, the greatest suffering. I said that in those places where there is no restrictions, they're the most miserable people. They're constantly bickering. This is why today, especially in time of the Golus, where we do not have the Psalmish, we do not have any kind of illumination. And everything that we need to accomplish requires hard work. Even to learn a piece of Mishnayos, to learn a piece of Gemara, to learn a piece of Chassidus, to daven, to do normal activities, we need to apply a lot of discipline. And do it over and over again and over again and over again until we begin to understand what it says. This hard work, superficially seems to be its hard work. Superficially, it appears to be something that is counterintuitive, counter in enjoyment. Yes, indeed. At the moment when it happens, it seems to be contrary to enjoyment. But this is the key to enjoying it. This is the key to enjoying it, ultimately. Even to enjoy a simple thing as a meal, as same plain food. Without the discipline, you cannot enjoy the food. Imagine the following, just to illustrate the point. Imagine two people eating side by side. One is eating food that he worked for, and he earned, and he paid for. The other is eating food that he stole. And they're eating exactly the same food. Can you possibly say that they're both enjoying the food the same way? No way.
Yeah,
No way.
Depends who you are.
Huh?
Depends who you are.
Makes no difference who you are. Makes no difference who you are. As a human being, you cannot possibly enjoy it. One is really enjoying his food. The other is just stuffing himself and taking away hunger. That's at most. But to enjoy the food, there's no way. And I'll tell you something. I went to the extreme. They stole the food. Even if it's not that extreme. The Gemara says that there is namadik sufa. Namadik sufa means bread that was given to you, but you didn't earn it. It's called embarrassing bread. Again, even though it was given to you, you didn't steal it. But it doesn't compare to enjoying a piece of bread that you actually labored for. This is just supposed to illustrate a very simple principle. You're sitting here and learning, and I know that it's taxing, and I know that it's difficult to sit for 2, 3, 4 hours on end and labor over one line of Gemara, or a line of Chumash, a line of Rashi, of Chassidus, over and over again until it begins to make sense, until it settles into my mind. It is very tedious and very taxing. And you would think that if I can relax now and I can walk around and look at the sunset or the sunrise, I'd enjoy life much more. Big mistake. Not true. Not true at all. This labor will bring out, this labor will develop your ability to enjoy everything else that you see. To appreciate beauty, to appreciate greatness. The mind has to be also taxed, has to be exercised. Just like your hand has to be exercised to be strong, your mind has to be exercised, your heart has to be exercised to be able to appreciate what you see. And then you can appreciate even the simple physical things in the world. And moreover, the important lesson from this sikha, the important lesson from that parsha is that this is something which is yours forever. This which you acquire quickly, you do not necessarily bestow it to your children. It's just something you have. And as the saying goes, that easy come, easy go. This which you acquire through hard work, this is yours forever. This is yours for your posterity. This is what you give over to your children, may Hashem's help. This becomes your forever. This becomes the mark of your home, of your life. I would like to suggest, I'm sure that everyone here has had moments when they worked very hard on a piece of Gemara, a piece of Chassidus, or something that they really worked hard to break through and to get to know it. I'd like you to think of it, and maybe sometime this evening, sometime tomorrow, find that piece of Gemara that you worked hard and see how you feel about it. See what pleasure you derive from reviewing it again. And see how you feel a special affinity to that Gemara. And you see how that becomes the key for everything else that you know. This is how we build up the human being. So this is simply to give us both a directive to understand. If something is coming hard, we have a rule in Chassidus. Something is coming hard, that means that this is what you're supposed to be doing. This is where I would say, this is the key to your success, to your intellectual success. And that is both intellectually successful, emotionally successful, physically successful. This is what puts us on our feet. As I mentioned many times, that the human being, we think he stands on his feet. Not true. You think the feet are holding up his head. It's not true. It's the head that's holding up the feet. And so, with God's help, we would all take, so to speak, the cue from our father Yankiv. Yes, he labored hard. Yes, he gave up a lot of sleep. And yes, he has what to show for it, for all times. And we are following in his footsteps. And God's help, we will also be successful in a similar manner, on a minor scale, but in a similar manner. So that when we ultimately have to face the world, we're not faced by it. We're not scared of it. We stand firm. We know exactly who we are. And we can go out and with God's help and build up our life, build our families, and accomplish our task in life. So these are our wishes. This is our blessings. This is our resolve. This is our resolve. We don't look for the easy way out. We face the challenges as they come, and we do it, and this is the key to success. And there's a posik that says, a posik in Mishlei, I believe, it says, Mesuka Shnaz Ha'eved, which translates as, the sleep of the hard worker is sweet. Huh? Where?
Where is the pasuk?
In Mishlei. But precisely where in Mishlei it is, I don't know.
By the verse it says
Huh?
by the verse that talks about the lazy man, like on the hinge.
Yeah, that's right.
Sleep. So there, sleep, also sleep.
What was that? What did you say?
Some people work hard to sleep, so there sleep is also sleep.
Not really. The secret is the pasuk.
Okay. So,
Now we really want
much success.